No more delays. Okay. Here we are. This is actually a revisit, but we're doing some analysis. The analysis requests have really piled up. The queue is like 5 games long, and I really got to start eating away at it. I tried to start reviewing this game maybe 4 streams ago, and it got super derailed, and I don't remember what happened in it. And I only got a few turns in, so we're just going to start from the beginning. This game was submitted for review by Void. 5D Void, aka Void Voyage. And it was played, he was playing the white pieces against Tones, who's playing the black pieces, aka AM Tony. This is, as you can see, Defended Pawn. Defended Pawn, of course, is the variant of choice for the 5D Chess League Season 3. At the time of previous analysis, I had barely played any Defended Pawn games in like a long time. So I actually had a lot less to say on the subject than I feel like I do now, so maybe it's better that I waited and redid this. Okay, so let's get into game. Again, Void is white, Tones is black. Let's see what's going on. Game starts. I remember this. Game starts, knight c3. Okay. What to say about knight c3? Where to begin? So Defended Pawn as a game mode came to being in order to combat the weaknesses on the f2 and f7 squares, namely that they are usually, with the standard configuration, only defended by the king and no other minor piece or major piece. The solution to that issue is that, as you can see, the queen has replaced the knight. They've flipped around. The knight's job is to defend the f pawn, and it does a very good job of that from d1. That's the whole point of this. On turn 1, by playing knight c3, what we've done is undefend f7. So the defended pawn from which the variant gets its name is now undefended. Which sounds like a problem because it is a problem. And I don't know how much... I mean, I've never like considered what happens when you do this. Hilariously, if you look at one of my previous videos, I think it's called How Not to Play Defended Pawn. Like maybe 3 or 4 moves into the game, I don't think it was turn 1, but it might have been. It's playing against Andre. It was one of the first like Defended Pawn games I'd ever played. I immediately undefended the pawn, and it went very poorly for me. I almost pulled it back together, but it wasn't a good look. So this is not great. I'd have to imagine that now like an f7 sack of some sort is possible, because like if you imagine, just, you know, hypothetically, let's say that like you push this pawn and then you get this queen out here, unless this pawn is pushed like immediately, there's gotta, like, let's say that you get a queen here, you might win. I mean, it's different it's different to the normal f7 sack, because, you know, the queen is on d8 instead of the queen's on b8 instead of d8. So I don't know if the queen could like maneuver their way over there, but you know, I don't know. I feel like it's very possible that this could be immediately losing. By immediately, I mean in like 7 turns or whatever. But anyway, not advisable. Let's just leave it at that and let's move on. Okay, how do you respond? First of all, the music's kind of distracting me, so give me 1 second. Give me 1 quick second to change the music. Okay, that's probably fine, right? All right, okay, we're back. I'll cut that part out of the video. We're back. Okay, b5. b5 was played. What does b5 do? Well, it baits this knight into thinking, aha, free pawn. What does it do other than that? I mean, it gets ready to kick this knight. The knight's kind of misplaced. Maybe. I mean, of all the pieces that you can sort of feel free to push, probably the B pawn is on the safe side. Doesn't exactly take center control, but in 5D chess, it's dangerous to do that, even in defended pawn. And I think that B5 is reasonable. I don't think that it has to have like a super, you know, there has to be like a very profound impact to this move. But B5, preparing to push up and kick this knight. Okay. This knight apparently gets nervous and jumps to E4. Knight E4 is the second move played by white this game. Okay. What does knight E4 do? It's 2 knight moves in a row. And from its position on E4, I suppose that it now does. Maybe white realized... Excuse me. Maybe white got a little nervous that they undefended the F2 pawn, and then remembered what this knight was supposed to be doing. And instead of bringing it back, because you don't want to not have played anything on turn 3 of the game, he moved it to E4 so that it would now defend F2 again. I mean, you know, it's a central location, but it's easy to kick. So this is kind of sus. If, I mean, you Frappuccino this bishop, black would be happy to get this out of the way, because no other piece can super easily defend the F2 pawn, right? You know, you can't even do like a simple... You can't do like a simple... It's harder for the queen to gain access to the F pawn in this variant, obviously, because all the way over here. Can't just do like an E3, you know, queen F3 or like a queen E2 sort of situation. So I think kicking this F pawn is really, or sorry, kicking this knight is really easy to do. How do you want to do that? I'd probably play knight F6 here. The bishop move kind of blocks in the queen. I mean, you can always sort of open up this diagonal, which you might want to do at some point anyway, from A7 all the way to F2, and develop it there. But probably knight F6 gets the job done. And it seems like that's exactly what happens in the game. Okay, so knight F6 is played. Black kicks this knight and asks it some questions, namely, what the hell are you doing? What is going on here? In response, C3 defends the knight, which is fair enough. It doesn't exactly alleviate the concern of piling on the pressure with like the bishop here, but it's certainly a start. It quickly, I think, will become tricky for white to defend this knight with many more pieces. Because you don't want to push either of these pawns. Maybe pushing this pawn isn't such a big deal. Probably the D pawn to push is fine, and that's like the only way that you can really cover this, I guess. Strange. All right, well, hey, this is where we are. 3C3 is the move that's played. Let's step back and do a quick evaluation before deciding that it's not worth it and just moving on with the game. Here, I think that it's kind of a no-brainer to apply additional pressure onto this knight, because as soon as this knight is gone, F7 is right for the taking, and it's easy for, you know, like E3 hasn't been played. You could even push the C pawn and get the queen over to like the F file or something like that. But what happens in game? Queen B6. Okay. Interesting. Black's got other plans. All right. Queen B6. Queen B6 immediately attacks the F2 square. Which seems fine to do. Though I think maybe this gives... Now that I look at the position, okay, c3 was played last turn. So you could play d4 this turn to block the... to block the queen, but it doesn't prevent the travel, if I'm not mistaken. To f2 on this board. Haas 00312, winner is now following. Thank you very much. I've gotten a lot of follows from a username with that template recently, so I think he's probably a bot. But again, in the off chance that it isn't, and there's a Haas clan that's a fan of 5D chess, thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate it. I don't think I'll dwell for too long on the fact that this f2 sack is probably a big deal, because I think it really might be. But it is still possible. The way that this game is going to play out, I suspect d4 is the next move, but let me actually check. Okay, d4 is the next move. All right, what's going on? Okay, taking here, and then if the queen recaptures, you get a sack onto f2 on this board. Am I overstating the importance of allowing this to happen? This is the only move that allows that travel to happen, by the way. It's probably not worth wasting too much time on. But certainly, this is an important consideration, I think, at least in like a timed match. Just letting f-file sacks occur, generally inadvisable. This is, I mean, it's like 4 moves into the game, and we're already throwing hands. These knights are attacking each other, the queens are in the game. This is shaping up to be a bit of a slugfest. I think that probably black is better here. After recapture, the queen gets kicked, and then nothing is defending f7, f2. But of course, with the d-pawn here, the queen doesn't have access. Then again, the queen can hop over to the f-file later to do a sack, and also I think a c-pawn push isn't out of the question. Although if you've already sacked this knight and moved this bishop, suddenly the d7 pawn is an issue because there's nothing defending it. So I'm not sure. Let's see what happens in game. Knight takes e4. All right. Black wants action, and they want it fast. It's going to get recaptured. It's the only, like, not only do you not want to lose the piece for no reason, but of course, this knight is now attacking f2, so you leave yourself open to, like, some potential travels, and it's sort of an unsightly business. So we recapture immediately, of course. What happens now, I think probably the bishop kicks the queen. But here, let me check. In the document, yes, we do get a frappuccino, and the bishop does kick the queen, which is a very natural looking move to play. Develops a piece with tempo, takes control of the long diagonal. But of course, this is 5D chess, so area control does not come without ramifications, namely overextension and a weakening of important squares in your structure. The square that I'm talking about, of course, is the d7 square. Without a pawn on the d7 square, or sorry, without the bishop defending the pawn on d7, black gives white an opportunity to travel here, potentially, at some point in the future, which necessarily draws the king out, or at the very least forces the black player to make some kind of travel to toss timeline priority back to the white player in order to execute some sort of recapture. I would be concerned about this because the board on which this queen travel occurs, drawing out this king, there is a queen right here. Is there a follow-up? It's difficult to say because, again, both players have elected to develop very few pieces before just going at it in the center. So maybe it's not a big deal. The other thing that enables this to sort of proceed no issue is if in the turn immediately following e6 is played, which is probably fine to play anyway. It kind of cuts off the queen from the king side, but it opens the eyes of this bishop. So unclear. This is a very... It's a unique structure for sure. Interesting to see where these players are going to go from here. Here, of course, you move the queen away. Question is where you move the queen. What's the best answer? Well, I mean, I suppose it's possible that you could push this pawn. Sort of cuts this bishop off. There isn't like a super easy way to kick that queen again. Could push this pawn here. But then you're sort of buying turns as white to set up this travel, right? So like if you do this now, then probably e6 isn't going to be played next turn, which means that, you know, in a turn or something, you can go queen f5 and then do a sack onto this pawn here. What happens in the game? In the game, we get queen g4. Queen g4, which immediately, nothing coy about this, immediately eyes up this weak d7 square. I think you probably didn't need to do this. It's certainly forcing. It's certainly forcing. However, usually what you want to do in situations like this, okay, this is an instructive moment. In the game of 5D chess, the thing that makes 5D chess have such unique strategic depth, and also which makes it very easy to apply many layers of pressure at the same time, is that at any point in time, there are two considerations for your opponent to make. They have to consider the threats that you are presenting to them on the board in the present immediately in like a 2D sense. And also the threats that you are generating of travels to potential boards from the future, giving rise to situations that are very uncomfortable for you, or, you know, in the worst case, lethal, right? If you give your opponent the option to alleviate both of those pressures at the same time, then you've done them a favor. What I'm saying is, in plainer terms, there was already a situation right here on this board as soon as this bishop move was made, where the black player had to worry about this weakness on d7 because the travel was going to happen, right? Again, I don't know if it's lethal, but it's certainly very scary looking, and I would probably go for it as white in a timed match. So now what they're going to have to do is either cover up this travel or like defend this pawn or make it impossible for you to do a travel onto this piece on this turn. The better way to take advantage of the fact that you have implicitly applied that pressure, or that they've applied that pressure onto themselves by choosing to make this move, is by giving them another threat somewhere else on the board that they have to answer, so that they can't afford to also take care of the threat of the travel onto this piece. Now, I don't know what better move you can do necessarily off the top of my head. This pawn move looks interesting, but also sort of gives rise to the, there's f2 isn't defended here on this board, so that's a bit of a problem. But there may be something else here. In any case, the reason that I don't like queen g4 is that this threatens, in the 2D positional sense, exactly the same place that the 5D travel into the past is being threatened on. So with a move like, for example, e6, you defend both the threat that is going to develop from here on this timeline into the future, and also you prevent this travel from happening, so you've killed two birds with one stone. So just off rip, completely intuitively, that's why this move seems not fantastic. And even if it is kind of like a decent move in the position, I think it's important to point that out, because those are the aspects of, those are like the nuances of 5D strategy that aren't immediately apparent when you first start playing the game, and that also, these are meant to be like instructional analyses. So there we go. We've gotten a good quick theory lesson out of this position. What happens here? I can't help but notice that f2 still isn't being defended. Of course, now this pawn blocks the travel, so you can't do anything like that, but it's possible that you could start to apply some pressure like on the f-file. Probably want to start developing your pieces. Kicking this queen here is decent. I think that e6 probably is a good move. You just prevent the travel altogether. You could also play bishop up, but that actually doesn't get the job done because the travel is happening on this turn anyway. So what do you do? What do you do? Well, let's see what Tones did in the game. Queen f6 did happen. Okay, applying pressure on the f-file. Eyeing up f2 is a decent game plan. It also appears to defend all of these important squares. Defending f7 means that the knight is liberated and suddenly you can develop that. These are considerations in defended pawn where you really want to be sort of perpetually cognizant of the weaknesses in your structure that your developing moves out of the opening create, and you want to make sure that you're shoring those up as you go. So developing this knight would have been a bad idea earlier because f7's undefended. Now that the queen is out here on f6, there's quite a good square for it. It's both defensively and offensively. Now you can afford to get another piece into the game, which is good. So that's good. The only issue again is that now it's actually much worse than it was before. The issue is a lot worse than it was before. Because not only have you enabled the travel to this board to happen, which again is probably bad, is probably very dangerous, but now you have provided white with a board where not only is d7 not defended, it's also attacked by this queen. So, a queen here now is like soft mate on the spot. You don't even need like a mating sequence coming out of it, but you have provided a threat onto the f2 square that the white player needs to address. They can quite easily do that with knight f6, or sorry, with knight f3, which is something that they really want to do anyway, probably. But this doesn't look good. Again, you can prevent that from being an issue next turn by playing e6. It's possible that what Tones thought is, okay, I want to play e6 to prevent this d7 from getting eyed up by this queen, but I don't like the fact that e6 prevents my queen from getting over to the king side, where it'll be much more active. I feel like it'll be stuck, especially with this pawn. And this square being defended, it's going to be very clunky to get my queen into the game, which I respect. And it's fine if next turn e6 is pushed. I think that that's reasonable. But let's just see what happens. Okay, so f2 is being attacked. You want to develop your pieces, both in order to defend against a future travel, but also to apply more pressure. I mean, queen, probably knight f3 here is, it's the most attractive move to me by far, especially because, I mean, then you can start thinking about, like, the d4 push has made e5 like a very natural square for the knight, and, you know, pushing the d pawn is kind of sketch, and pushing the f pawn's impossible because the queen is here, so I think that's decent. I mean, you do maybe, like, enable this trade to happen, but if this bishop is traded into the knight on f3, actually I think that that's pretty decent for white. Lexi, I've said this in the past, and Lexi used to sort of perpetuate this line of thinking, but in situations like this, where there's like the piece, or where there's either a queen sack on the king side, like on the f file, or like if a bishop goes into a knight here, like this, I think that that's fine for the player who's getting exchanged on. Because when you take on f3 with the g pawn, yes, it doubles your pawns, but it makes it more difficult. It makes f2 less the critical f pawn, less accessible to the opponent, and crucially, it enables you. It opens up the file, and it enables you to develop your rook. Rooks in general in 5D chess, I think, are pretty heavily. They get slept on, for good reason, arguably. You know, they're not very good, like in 5D chess, until the endgame. But endgames are more rare, and they tend to, especially when there's like a very clear like 5D vulnerability, like an undefended f-pawn or whatever. Being able to get a rook early on into positions where they enable you to create, while you still have other pieces, dangerous travel opportunities, I think is like an underutilized tool in 5D chess. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you to go like a4 rook a3 or anything, but you know, like, developing rooks is hard in 5D chess, and I think that the opening of the Jeep file, when there's like either a queen exchange or like a piece exchange like this on like f3 or f6, I think is actually pretty good for the side that's getting opened up. But let's see where it goes from here. Okay, so white to play, what do they actually do? It's not knight f3, it's actually bishop e3. Potentially, this exchange is exactly what white wanted to avoid here. I mean, the bishop defends f2, so why not? Whereas the knight on f3 doesn't actually directly defend f2. But okay, bishop e3 is what happens. Now, black players got an issue. I mean, they had an issue before. It's like one turn before this travel is allowed, so that's a little sus. But they really need to prevent a travel to this board, like, for sure, for sure. It's a bad look. How do you do that? I mean, you could push e6 here. You don't have many options. You could kick the queen, then they move back, but then they sack in 2 turns anyway. Unclear. If the bishop was still on c8, then maybe d6, you know, would attack the queen. I don't know. What happens in the game? How do they get out of this? Queen e6. Interesting. Okay. If you're gonna play queen e6 anyway, why play queen f6? queen e6. Queen e6 is a good way to do it because it prevents the sack entirely, right? I think actually probably queen e6 here. No need to submit to the sunk cost fallacy. I think given that this has happened and it's your turn here, queen e6 isn't terrible. Queen e6 isn't terrible because trading queens, you're a little, you know, get the threat off the board. You've got a knight that can recapture, so you're not sort of harming your structure in a very profound way. It does, taking with the knight means that there's nothing defending f7, but you no longer have a queen that can sack onto f7 anyway, and like a bishop sack isn't that lethal onto f7. No, you can't quit your job at the sunk cost factory, not before you get your 10-year award. Something like that. I don't know how well the sunk cost factory provides in terms of benefits with like 401k, stock options, you know. If it's like a low skill job, which I think it kind of is, you're probably better off getting out of there sooner rather than later, just for quality of life purposes. Queen e6 happens, and I don't hate it. It's got to be said, I don't hate it. I really don't. Okay. We could play the what do you do here as white game, but I'm so puzzled by white's next move. I sort of glanced ahead and saw where we were going. That I don't think I can muse impartially. Bishop f4. What a move this is. What the hell? By the way, actually, give me one moment. This is a strategy that I very seldom utilize. This is a strategy that I very seldom utilize, but one that I think sort of has some degree of merit. When you see a queen trade on the board, there is something that you have to consider. Normally, it's not worth doing a travel and giving your opponent timeline priority just to capture an opponent's queen. Because oftentimes, yes, you may be up 2 queens to 1, but given that your opponent now can create 2 timelines with impunity and they've got a queen on the initial board still, it's not worth. Usually it's not worth. I mean, position, never say never, like there are positional considerations, but usually just to go up a queen, it's not worth. Because your opponent has a queen and timeline priority, so they can make some scary stuff happen, right? They can make 2 timelines. In the event where you can make a timeline or, you know, do a travel to capture an opponent's queen in such a way that it results in you owning the only queen of the game, that is much stronger, and it can be argued is a very worthwhile travel to make. Why am I bringing this up here in this position? Well, if you trade queens here, this bishop's here on e3. It's probably not going to get kicked from e3 anytime soon, right? It's chilling. If you trade queens here, queen in here, and then like recaptures or whatever, then in just a few turns, you have the opportunity to, from a board which has no queens on it, remember, travel this bishop onto this queen here, resulting in you having the only queen in the game. Yes, you've given your opponent timeline priority, but now you've got 1 queen on the new timeline, and they've got 0 queens. And so that's a consideration here. That's why trading might be good. It's one reason that trading might be good. That's an idea that you don't see come up super often, and people always bring up like the circumstances under what do you need to get back for a timeline to be worth it? Like, why would you ever travel to capture a queen? Would you not, etc.? I wouldn't, but in a situation where it gives me the only queen in the game, I probably would. Especially on a board as undeveloped as this one. Like, you take this queen on this board, and what does black have going on for them? A frappuccinoed bishop? It doesn't look fantastic. So, and they've still got this bishop here, by the way. Like, after the travel happens, this bishop on this board will be here. So that's a consideration. Okay, where are we at? Right, what's played in the game is bishop f4. Ryan in the chat says, trade queens, then d5 seems good. Trade queens, like this, then d5 seems good. Interesting. I guess that's setting up the travel, yeah. Trade queens. Then d5 seems good. Ah, okay. Traveling on to d7. So it's the yes, very good. Okay, hey, that's fantastic. Well spotted, chat. Bishop travels onto pawns that are defended only by the king. Usually a lot less appealing than other kinds of travels. The fact of the matter is that on this board, if you could get a bishop to d7 here, I was really only thinking about the queen travel. If you could get a bishop travel here, this bishop will be defended. This king is smothered. On the new timeline, like, yeah, it's not like checking this king on this board, so, you don't, like, you can run away with the king, but you literally can't because the king is smothered. So in this position, very strong, and super dangerous. A way that you can get there, which is very difficult for black to stop at this stage, is to trade, again, very well spotted by Ryan, is to trade the queens, push this pawn up, kick this knight, do whatever. You don't really care. Your only goal is to, like, let's see, one turn, I guess, after you push this, like, you can do some other move if you want. And then you can play bishop d2, and then the 3 turns after you push this pawn, you'll be able to sack the bishop. It's not a sack, but you'll be able to travel the bishop onto here on this board, which will win the game. So that's a good play. Another reason that trading is good. Even better than what I suggested. Back to bishop f4. All right, so, I mean, it astutely observes that there's now a weakness in black structure. The c7 pawn is undefended, so it attacks that. I can't help but notice that it drops the queen. Is there a tactical consideration that I'm missing? Probably not. It's not even really setting up for an f7 sack because black opted not to undefend f7 on the first turn of the game. What? What's happening? The Virgin Queen trade versus the Chad Queen sack. Yeah, something like that, man. Holy butts. F7 all the while. Or F2 all the while, by the way. Like, not only does this give up the queen, it undefends F2. So you might think, aha, yes, I've done it. Like, I've won the pawn here. You're gonna lose the game. What is going on? I mean, no fear. Playing without fear is commendable. Maybe some amount of fear is healthy. My flabbers are aghast. And I'm not sure what to do about that. So let's just see what happens. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that we see queen takes g4. Yes, the document confirms that we do see queen takes g4. We do then see bishop takes c7. Okay. All right. Okay. Now what? I'm at a loss. I mean, the queen can't go to f4 to, like, threaten some immediate shenanigans, I guess. But, man. Down a queen, but up a pawn. Cool cat. Yeah. Okay. G2, by the way, doubly attacked right now. So bishop takes g2 is very enticing. I mean, even if you can, not even just to, like, even if somehow you didn't get the exchange in this way, it takes the bishop off of the defense of e2, right? And so you win in like 2 turns. Queen f4 out of pity. Honestly, queen f4, single exclam. Yeah, no, that's the gentleman's play here. I don't see a move better than bishop takes g2. Do you? Probably not. I mean, it's either that or like set up for an immediate. And again, that doesn't even seem that good. Like, you could play queen f5 or queen h4, which both eye up f2. I don't know. Let's just see what happens. Queen g5. Queen g5. Rook b8. Rook b8. Questionable suggestion. Rook b8 exclam question mark. Yes, very good. Queen g5. If I'm reading this right. What a series of moves. Okay. What's the idea behind queen g5? I'd say it threatens a back rank, but it doesn't because there's a knight. It prevents a castle. Yeah, maybe. White doesn't want a castle anyway, because of triagonal concerns, but queen g5. Queen g5. Queen g5. Did we look at the fact that bishop takes g2 was a thing here? I certainly did. Bishop takes g2 jumped out at me as, like, completely winning. as brutally winning. Yes. But queen g5. Okay. I missed that. Sorry. No, not at all. Evidently, the black player here also missed that. Not the move, but... Well, they missed the move, but they also missed the discussion. Okay, the idea behind queen g5... You know what? Queen g5 makes sense. It doesn't make a ton of sense, but... It threatens... Okay. I've got a storyline here. All right, we figured it out. Everyone's all concerned about these f2 travels as white, right? That's what they're going to be looking for. They want to prevent the f2 travel. So if you go f2, really, you're just... If you go toward f2, you're playing into their hand, right? The objectively better play, obviously, is to prepare a much sneakier capture or travel that isn't a capture, but still is soft mate. And that travel is on to d2. That must be the play. Right? I think we've got the storyline. Okay, this is like the hipster's conversion of the position. I mean, the queen gets kicked immediately, so it's not very good. Knight of 3 is like a move here, but then if knight of 3, bishop g, knight of 3, by the way, also, hold on, knight of 3, we didn't consider knight of 3, yes, kicks the queen, and then you might think, but we take with the bishop, so it doesn't matter, and we bought ourselves a turn, but we haven't, because we can't travel to a board where knight f3 defends d2. I don't know, man. I'm at a loss. All right, queen g5. What actually happens here? Knight f3 is what happens here. Okay, so knight f3 happens here. The queen gets kicked, but you want this queen because presumably you put it there for a reason. You want this travel to happen real bad. If you saw it, like, to some extent. Well, okay, sure, no, okay, this is fine, right? Because after bishop takes and then pawn recaptures, then queen here, you don't have like a g pawn because the recapture has to happen with the g pawn, otherwise you're crazy. He doesn't have a g pawn to push, so it's difficult to prevent f2 shenanigans. But then they can just pull the bishop back to g3. The real powerful time travel is traveling into the future to watch someone's analysis of your game before it happens. Facts. Bringing the sports almanac with you. Yeah. Yeah, something like that. Okay, well, hey, this happens, because why would it not? Then you get a recapture. Wait. You don't get a recapture. Okay. The concern, I suppose, is that after this, there's no way to prevent the travel. So, white's cool with being down on another piece on a board where they're down a queen. And they push e3. e3 does prevent any of these queen shenanigans that we've been talking about. It enables this. Granted, black didn't see this before, so no great reason that they should see this in the future. But e3's been put. Maybe that's the. Okay, hold on. Let's say, okay, you're down material. You're convinced that your opponent doesn't see g2, like it's impossible. They've got, it goes against their moral code, their 5D standards. They're just sworn off of it. Blood oath, right? Bishop takes g2 is not to be played under any circumstances. Given that condition, if you trust your opponent to not see that move, is e3 a better move than g takes e3? I guess it probably is. I guess it probably is, because otherwise, to be fair, I'm not sure that's true, because I mean, after you take on g3, like this happens, and then you can pull the bishop back, and if the queen doesn't go back, then you can push the pawn and it's defended by the bishop. Man, this analysis is taking some degree of mental gymnastics. All right, what do? As black, you take on g2. But what happens in the game? Bishop e4. Okay. It worked. The gamble paid off. Can't even complain. My man knows what The man knows what's up. What a game. Bishop e4 has happened. What's the idea of bishop e4? Well, you gotta infiltrate. You want to get your bishop out of harm's way, but you want it to stay active. Here it stares into a scary piece of white's territory here. Infiltrating with the bishop, of course, less good than infiltrating with the queen, but you know, beggars and choosers and all that. Yeah. Sure. King d2 double exclam. King d2 does prevent this business, you know, entirely. So yeah. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised. But what do you do as white? For real though, what do you do as white? Rook c1's an option. Get your rook into the game. This bishop... I mean, maybe you're afraid that if you move this bishop and actually... well, I mean, that's obviously not great because it's covered by a queen, but if you move this bishop, maybe the concern is that he'll realize that there's no reason not to take this pawn, so you want to keep that still. What do you do? Kicking this bishop loses on the spot. There isn't a lot to do here. What happens? H4 happens. H4 kicks the queen, which is great. Kicks the queen. That's good, right? Why not? H4 has happened to kick the queen. Setting up for a Jurassic that leads to an analysis rage quit. H4 best move. Maybe you're right. Maybe H4 is the best move. Alright. The next move is sus. But if you've got pieces to throw, I guess you probably don't care. Alright, this isn't good, but what happens next is this bishop captures this pawn one turn in the past. Now, maybe it's okay. The reason that you normally don't want to go one turn in the past to capture a pawn is that, of course, the pawn from the original timeline can capture itself in the past. Here, that doesn't seem fantastic because it opens this up, and in 2 turns, 3 turns, whatever, in just a few turns, you're gonna get mated here on the diagonal. Was there a better way to convert? Probably. Do you want to take here? Nah, it loses. Do you have any option other than to take with this pawn? Not really. Don't worry, guys. I booted up Stockfish and H4 was the top. There you go. Okay, all right. So what? This travel happens. All hail Stockfish. Something like that. That's like Anarchy 5D chess, which is a subreddit that doesn't exist, but maybe should. Anarchy 5D chess thinks that Stockfish is king. This pawn move surely is the only way to deal with this situation. Probably. Look, you don't have a lot to work with, okay? You don't have to travel. You didn't have to travel. Oh, I've been using Stonkfish? Dude, that's where you went wrong. You're up a knight and a queen in a position that's almost unlosable. The only way that you will lose games like this is by enabling your opponent to pull some 5D cheese. So really, you don't want to travel in a situation like this. You want to exchange pieces down to an end game. You want to set up like a lethal travel that your opponent can't defend against. You might even want to sack pieces into the pawns, right, to open up the structure. Here you've given the opponent timeline priority, and honestly, I don't know how you defend here, but it's just unnecessary risk. Now, this is actually the capture that happens. This capture happens. What do you do as black in this position? I don't really know. You probably set up for like mate the next turn. Queen f5 here gives you mate the next turn. After queen f5, if the opponent doesn't deliver check, then the next turn, the queen from f5 on this board goes to e4 on this board, and you have mate. Stockfish wanted f takes e3, but I guess you could use that alternate dimension pawn. Stupid Stockfish. It doesn't even see the pawn at the different time from the other dimension. I think queen f5 here is probably a no-brainer. So I'm a big queen f5 fan, always have been. You threaten mate in one, right? Stockfish went bishop e2. Thanks for catching me up, guys. You could also just take this bishop again with this pawn. It works. But whatever. What happens in game? I'm almost afraid to ask. All right. Queen g5 goes to f4. Hanging the queen to the bishop. But more importantly than that, you don't want to... Okay. Guys. Bishop travels to d7 is interesting now. I completely agree with you. The idea here is probably to also set up a mate in one. Because, you know, this file is the place to be, right? The only issue is it sets up a mate in one that your opponent can immediately deal with. But also, you give your opponent back the turn. Right now, you force your opponent to take back. In a situation like this, you're laughing. Why? It's your turn here, right? So you can set up this mate in one here, and your opponent only has this board to deal with it. But if you do this, you know, anytime you move a piece from one board to the other, you have to realize that you're losing tempo. And that's a very, in 5D chess, super, like, tactically important idea. Especially in variants, like as soon as you've got any number of timelines, if you're doing too much like piece back and forth between the timelines, every single one loses you a net move because it takes the turn of two boards to make that movement happen, right? So like you lose the turn, you use up both your turn here and your turn here. You know, this is like basic rudimentary. This is how the game works. By moving on to this board, you give your opponent, who you've backed into a corner, a little bit of wiggle room. I don't see how they use it to win the game. Maybe I do see how they use it to win the game, actually. Okay, there's actually a bit of an issue here as black, and here's why. All right, hold on. Let me just say, if you saw, okay. If you saw that having a queen on f4 was good, is black's idea to feed one queen to the rook? and then recapture with mate? Excuse me? Is black's idea to feed one queen to the rook? Which queen are you feeding to the rook? Unclear. But if you saw that this is a good move, why not play this move? Because, yeah, you lose the tempo, so it's, like, worse than f5 here. Oh, with queen c1. Okay. Yeah, possibly. I see what you're saying. Maybe this was the idea, was that you've got this queen battery, right? The only issue is, you know, that doesn't work if either of these queens gets captured. You might think, oh, if he captures with the pawn... No, you still don't have mate! Bruh, okay. This gets taken by this bishop, which means that this queen move isn't... Which means that this queen move is no longer mate after the bishop capture, right? So, the bishop captures, then the queen captures, then the queen's threatening mate, yes? But that's like 3 turns from now, and that's not good. There is a danger here. The other reason that this is bad news bears. By the way, the other reason that queen f5, while I'm at it, the other reason that queen f5 on this board is good is because you may not be aware of this. Oh, wait, you can't. Okay, hold on. So I was going to say it defends against a travel here to take on to here, but then this bishop from this board will be checking this king here. So actually, that's not a legal travel for white. But I was going to say, you have to worry about this now. The thing about this bishop here is that on this board, when you give white... Okay, so this move happens. When you give white the turn on this board... when you give white the turn on this board, suddenly this is a situation in which white can make a travel happen. Maybe not this turn, but like I guess the next turn. Which is why maybe it's not such, like as big a deal as I'm making it. But if this travel were possible, then you couldn't recapture. Like it would force a king recapture, and that would be like bad news bears. But I guess that's not like such a critical consideration in the position. I've dwelled on this turn for way too long, so let's just do this. Queen from g5 goes to f4. Bishop parallel travels down his mate, right? Oh, find the soft mate in 1 for white is what you guys are saying? Oh, after this happens? Yeah, hold on. I mean, this seems good. But am I wrong in thinking it's... It's white's turn on this board. Okay, this is actually exactly what I was saying. So this flows into my... Thank you for... I like missed a stepping stone and my chat sort of like put it right under my foot at the last second so I didn't fall into the river. My point was, by giving white the turn here, you kind of put yourself in deep shit. And this is the travel that I was looking at, but actually this travel is devastating. And the reason is that... actually, it's not, because the knight recaptures. Oh, and it's funny. I just saw that my chat actually caught that themselves. So I got baited by my chat, but then unbaited. Well, to be fair, I unbaited myself before I realized. Okay, if you can only see this, this is a devastating travel because this king can't capture here because this bishop defends that bishop. However, and the king is smothered, so it can't run away. This knight can crucially capture that bishop, so it actually doesn't work. So, okay. So, anyway, what do? Probably capture the queen here? I don't know. I think, okay, shockingly, or maybe not so shockingly, we are approaching the end of the file here, so I think we're almost done. Okay, on -1L, we get... Okay, yeah, you don't have to play there, so, you know, no need to make an unforced move. G takes F3 occurs, followed by on this board. You don't have very much to do. Why not kick the bishop? I guess. Rook C8. Rook C8 happens. Now, oh my god. If the bishop takes here, white's got to check. Is that a problem? Alright, well, the travel we were looking at before doesn't work, so what about now? This actually looks really scary, doesn't it? Because you provide double check. Like if you do this, king takes his only legal move. And then here, this bishop checks this king one turn in the past. This bishop checks this king one turn in the future. Or sorry, in the present is what I meant. So, oh, sorry. The king can capture the bishop. My bad. The king can capture the king can just capture both bishops in a row. It's fine. So I take that back. However, this travel seems much better because it forces the king out. It's white's turn in the middle now, and this knight can no longer recapture. So this is forced only move takes. And then what do you do? Then maybe you check, and then king takes. And then you sort of wait. You like push this pawn and then you mate here. Something like that, right? Oh, wait, no. This bishop is now successfully defending this. Sorry, I got lost in the sauce. I apologize. This game has been a doozy. Okay. The king only legal move is recapture, except it's not a legal move because it's defended by the bishop. So now we have exactly the same mate as before, except now the knight doesn't recapture. So insanely, from the up a knight and a queen with even timelines game emerges a loss. That's a loss. Well, okay, it's not a loss because actually this rook can... Wow, it's not a loss. Hold on. This move happened. Or sorry. If this travel were to happen, then this rook... No, it is a loss because the bishop delivers check. I think it's game. All black can do is travel from this board. And I mean, none of these travels are good. And the Jurassic Rook is only 2 turns into the past. I thought, oh, the rook moves so he can go back. But not really. Okay, white wins this game. I can't... Is this real life? Okay, that's fine. Hey, Tones is here. The stream's still going. Howdy. Howdy, Tones. This is actually your game that we're reviewing. This is a game that Void played against you. Never resign, kids. For real, though. Wow. White has mate in one. But the game's not over yet. So what does white do? Bishop c7 to d... Okay. It's the parallel travel. So white opts not to mate in one. This has been a long-standing philosophy for my channel. But, of course, when you see mate in one, you look for better. Right? This is integral to the culture of 5D chess. Certainly on my stream. Let's just see what happens here. Okay, this is forced, right? You gotta take back. Wow! That's not what happens. Remember what I was saying about, like, moving on the board being good? Because cross timeline moves lose tempo? Well, black disagrees. And instead takes with the king from upstairs. Maybe it's like an advanced bond cloud. You have two queens on that board, it follows that you need two kings. I knew there was a reason Ryan was on the leaderboard. This guy gets it, man. He understands. He understands the will of the people. What am I looking at? Okay, this happens. All right, this has happened. This has happened. Now what do? You got two queens on the board. You got two queens on the board. It follows that you're going to want to get one of them off. Taking on board was mate after bishop takes b5. No. It's funny. I just fell into that trap myself, Tones. If you take with the king on the board and this check happens, actually taking with that king is made on board, because now you're skewering the kings through each other. So exactly the opposite. If you took with this king on this board and this bishop check happened, this bishop is only checking the king on that turn. If you take, and this bishop, it's double check, yes. This bishop checks this king one turn into the past, and this bishop checks king on board. But you can get out of both of those checks by capturing the c7 bishop with the d7 king, which I also missed, so I don't blame you. However, hilariously, white has mate in one here. Right? Because now you might say, okay, there's double check. Can't you just recapture? Well, no, because this king is pinned. This king is pinned to this king. But this isn't what's played. Why win the game? It might still be mate. Somehow, I have a feeling that it will be. I don't know how. But let's see. Okay, when you find mate in one 2 turns in a row, the dream is really to voluntarily pass up mate in one 3 turns in a row. And potentially give up checkmate yourself. So, what? But then they can capture the bishop with the... Okay, this happens. White plays on this timeline. I apologize. I'm getting worked up. H takes g5 is played. Why? For style. Why would you not? And on this board, he sees the pawn capture. on this board, bishop. Okay, so my man's plays bishop takes b5. Maybe what he thinks is, on this board there's an undefended pawn, and I want to try and get at that pawn. So on this board it makes sense, but on this board you don't want to play this because, of course, that piece is defend. You don't want to give up the bishop for free. Bishop for pawn is a bad trade. So I'm getting genuinely lightheaded. Okay, cool. This happens. All right, so forced, you got to deal with this. How do you deal with that? I've lost my thread. I apologize. Okay, here, king takes c7 happens. Of course it does. Why would you not? Okay. Rook takes c3 happens on this board. Spicy. Blunderfest SMH. It's all good, man. I mean, what we don't see here is like, you know, time crunch. Also, like, if it wasn't an entertaining game, it would not have been submitted. At least you're not. At least you're not the one who missed made and went on board that many times. I mean, you know, I don't know if it's worse. We're just gonna say both of you. Both of you were doing your best to style. We're gonna give you the benefit of the doubt because we always do. That's just how we play the game. Okay, this happens. Now what do you do? I think this is mate. Again, it's the same capture as before. So white has mate again. Now, white didn't see it the first time, so I think it's unlikely that they're going to see it with, like, the esoteric bishop travel that's, like, 2 temporal dimensions. So there's that. What else? How else? Let's see. Narik says that white has mate again, but then he said white has mate again without travel. This isn't mate. Right? Because then knight out just covers. Yeah, am I crazy? If this is what you meant. Because then this is the first turn, the king's here, so the knight out covers. Oh, you were looking at bishop takes d7. Ah, bishop takes d7, bishop takes b5. Okay, so bishop takes d7. So here, the only problem with this, so obviously this bishop checks this king is the idea. And this bishop checks this king. But both are dealt with this king travel, so not quite. I mean, okay, the next, like, if they do this, then, like, probably in a turn, this is going to be mate. But again, there are a lot of ways to mate here. So I'm not, yeah, it's not mate on board. It's not mate on board, so I do not accept. Yeah. But this bishop move is mate on board immediately. Or, you know, it's soft mate. It's hard mate. I mean, like, okay, it's not hard mate, but it is hard mate. It's mate, man. Like, this wins the game. It just does. Okay. The game goes on is the thing. That's the thing. The game doesn't end this turn. Oh, okay. Actually, what is played in the game is... There's no past? Doesn't the knight just block? Maybe you're right. It checks the king on this board, doesn't it? The knight blocks. Oh, this bishop doesn't yet check this king. I was thinking that this bishop checks this king because they're on the same square, but the king only just moved there that square. So actually, it's not immediate mate. If the bishop goes here, then the knight blocks. Then you have mate in... then you have to take here. And then it's mate? Right? No, queen take... If queen takes, then this is mate. Because, for the same reason that it was made up here. Because now there's history, etc. Whatever, man. Okay, it's not made in 1, it's made in 2. Alright, it's made in 2. What happens in the game is actually this. So he was like, it's rude to attack a king through a king. You just don't do that to a bro. Or maybe it's, he thought it's unoriginal to play bishop takes b5 on both boards at the same time. They had to take turns. After you. Maybe he thought this was mate for the reason that Narik thought it was mate. However, we quickly see that there is only one legal move. And it's this one. It is played. Now what do you do? Sir. Okay, the move that is played Whoa! Wait, that's cool. It's this move. Wait! Both of these bishops check a king on the other timeline. This is mate. Right? Like, this bishop checks this king. This bishop checks this king. It's hard mate on that board. What? That's very cool. I would not have spotted that, man. Why hard mate? Because from a single board, two different pieces are checking two different passed kings. That's what we call hard mate. In other words, there is no way the game must end at the very latest on this turn. Like, there is no way if the game proceeds to this turn that black cannot lose. You know what I mean? Like, you can't... Okay, so to get out of this, what you would normally do is capture one of the pieces, but both of the pieces this turn need to be captured, otherwise next turn they will be able to take a king in the past. Oh, why checkmate? Oh, it's checkmate because there are no travels. I think. Here. Check on that board. Alternatively, check on this board. And that check is actually quite funny. I just thought it must be the case that this is the case, but found it hard to believe that an open queen couldn't find a move to play. Well, yeah, the thing is that it can't go back super far, and if it goes that many turns into the past, then both of those, all those bishops, man. But I agree, it is surprising. I agree with you. What an end to the game. All right, that was kind of a cool. That was a cool way to end that game. Wow. Wow. I mean, okay, if we're following the narrative, which I suppose we are, uh this is a worthwhile checkmate to build up to by rejecting all of the mates in one that you had the prior 3 or 4 turns. Our protagonist comes out on top in the end. I don't know that he's our protagonist, but certainly I guess he is our protagonist. Maybe you're right. Well, he was playing from behind. And we are looking at the game from his perspective, so that's fair. Our protagonist does come out in the end. I guess that was like a forced 3-move sequence too. Ryan says, imagine doubting the queen sack would have got him a perfectly placed bishop on c7. Notwithstanding the fact that after the queen sack, black had mate. Well, black had like unavoidable mate threats well before this could possibly happen. Again, he didn't have to travel, remember? But no, that was a great finish. Dude, it's hilarious that there's also no, what the hell? That was a photo finish. That was a photo finish.